This week, London Real meets UFC fighter Dan Hardy.
I'm not an athlete, I'm a fighter that's trying to be a martial artist.
His wins and his losses.
That's it, I'm done. I'm not enjoying it anymore. This is not fun for me anymore. I'm not getting anything out of it, I'm just getting damaged.
He talks the spirit world.
The thing is, like, ayahuasca doesn't necessarily do anything to change the person. It just helps the person understand who they are.
And introduces the wolf heart.
They want to feed the wires into my heart so they can measure the second heartbeat. So they can then burn it.
London Real presents Dan Hardy, Uncut.
Every subject's on the table, so feel free to ask away.
I'm standing in Parliament Square, right in front of my man Winston Churchill. He once said, "Never has so much been owed by so many to so few." And at the time he was talking about the Blitz that was happening here from September 1940 into May 41, where the Germans were literally bombing the shit out of London. And who he was talking about was the RAF, the Royal Air Force, and how they were going up every day and protecting the airspace of England. And it's pretty much why some people say we're not speaking German in this country. And it's a fantastic thing to think about, how the entire British Isles owe so much to those few hundred, maybe 1,000 Air Force pilots and personnel that protected us from war. And I'm not making an analogy to London Real guests, but certain people burn really bright and they inspire us so much and change the way we live our lives by the way they live their lives. And I think one of them was our guest this week, and that is UFC fighter Dan Hardy. I was very excited about having Dan on the show. As I told him in the beginning of the interview, he's almost a quintessential guest for London Real because he talks about such things as consciousness, the important role of psychedelics in his life, and of course martial arts, which we've always been a big fan of here on the show, as you know. And Dan couldn't have been any better than I expected. He's a very nice guy, a very humble guy. Him and his girlfriend, Lacey, were just courteous, lovely, and pretty much hang out for about 3 hours, filmed the show. We did a photo shoot afterwards with Dan laying down on the Union Jack rug we have here in the studios, and it was just a really fantastic time. And one of the things Dan said early on in the interview, he said everything was on the table. He said you can ask whatever you want. This is a guy who is at a crossroads right now in his fighting career. But worst case is probably going to stay on as a television personality for the UFC, perhaps here in Britain. And a lot of guys would start to be careful about what they say. If you're going to be on Fox in the US, you might not mention the cannabis, or you might not mention the psilocybin mushrooms. But Dan isn't like that, and I have to give him much respect. I asked him off camera afterwards why you're so open, and he said, Brian, he's like, I've lived my life and met all these wonderful people because I'm so open. And if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have had these adventures and met these people. So he said, ultimately, that's why I do it. And it made me think a lot about, being open about what you do and who you are, and how you're probably shutting down pathways in your life by not being honest about who you are or what you do. So really enjoyed having Dan in the show. We had a whole new setup in the studio. I had a professional guy come in to light it, DOP, director of photography. We had 8 cameras instead of 3 in the London Real Studios. I was stressed out all week. It was crazy, but I want to thank Dan Hardy because he made me step up my game. And just like, I guess, an opponent in the cage, at the end of the day, you're happy because that guy made you become a better skilled at what you do. So I'm really excited about the episode. It looks beautiful, and it's a real change from our split screen, which you're so used to. But we're always in studio with our guests every time, and I think sometimes people can't feel it. And during this show, you can really tell that I could really reach out and touch Dan if I wanted to, or touch Patrick, and it's that intimate. So I really hope you enjoy that episode and the feeling and everything about that. In case you're wondering where we are, I'm in Westminster Square, and that is Westminster Abbey behind me. It's beautiful. It's where the recent royal wedding was, which of course I watched on television. You've got some famous statues here. Behind me is Mr. Nelson Mandela. There he is, a fantastic example of a human being, and this place is kind of a living history of what's going on here. And I thought it was very fitting for our British guest, Dan Hardy. So there you go. That's the show. As you know, I am lucky enough to do these shows because we have people that support the show, that love what we do here and are open to all the topics, which are quite controversial. And one of those are the guys at Bulletproof. And I'll have to ask you a question. You probably are a coffee drinker, but I must say is that sometimes when you have a cup and it doesn't feel exactly right, it's probably because there's a lot of molds and toxins that go on in your regular beans. And I think it's kind of an industry secret when it comes to the major coffee chains. And so what Bulletproof does is just try to minimize the hell out of those things. And then they add grass-fed butter and brain octane oil, which is kind of like the best of coconuts. And you drink that in the morning and it just has your brain working right. And I'm a big fan. I had a cup this morning. It cuts down on my breakfast. I kind of have a fast in the morning. And it's just a great way to start my day. And I encourage you to check it out. So I'll leave you with that. As you know, if you are in the UK, which there's Big Ben behind me, obviously I am, and you want to get that Bulletproof, it's easy. The guys at X-Brain have got you sorted, man. They've got your back. You can basically get a bag of Bulletproof and a bottle of MCT oil on your doorstep in 2 days, probably lose those 10 pounds you've been wanting to, and just feel better. So if you want to hit those guys up, go to xbrain.co.uk. On top of that, they got this whole new line of whey protein I'm very excited about. It's organic. These guys are taking this very seriously. I have tried the banana and the chocolate, and I really like the taste. I'm going to be having it after every workout for the next 2 weeks, and I'll keep you posted. I came off whey after my first ayahuasca ceremony because I had to stop it for the diet, and then I just never incorporated it back in. You'll find that about ayahuasca. And so now I'm excited to go back in, and it's organic, and try that out. So check it out. Like I said, it's only the best stuff that they make, and you can find that at xbrain.co.uk. And there you go. Now I'm going to leave you with, I think what was an hour and a half of Dan. He talked about his 4-loss losing streak in the UFC, which is about as hard as it gets for a UFC fighter. If you think most UFC fighters at least have the mercy of getting cut after 3, Dan went in after 4, and then he did an ayahuasca ceremony after his first win after that, and then he came back and got another win. And so he's got such an interesting story that brought him to this period. He talks very detailed about psilocybin to a point where you can probably see my jaw just drop, because he describes like hour by hour exactly how he takes psilocybin. And it finishes with a kettlebell workout and a run in the desert, and something I had never thought of. So again, Dan taught me a few things on this show, and so I appreciate that. And finally, we talked about the wolf heart, which is a small additional heartbeat that he's been found to have, and that might be the end of his UFC career. We don't know for sure, but it seems like he's making some peace with that. And as he admitted, it's an anxious time for him, because we all need to get out of our comfort zone. You might think that guys go into the UFC on a regular basis are completely out of their comfort zone, but he admitted training and fighting is what he's actually comfortable doing, and all this other stuff is going to be new. So I wish him well in that journey. I think he's really going to take it and run with it. And there you go. If you want to get in touch with us at London Real, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. You can send us an email at info@londonreal.tv. We met a fantastic Final Cut editor for this episode. You're going to see her handiwork. Met her on Twitter. She came over and basically edited the hell out of this thing. So big thanks to Christy Madley for that. And if you want to get involved in any way, send me a message. We'll hook it up. And now I give you UFC fighter, and in my opinion, probably the most outspoken and well-known advocate of psychedelics in Britain, Mr. Dan Hardy.
I say we do this. Cool. Yep.
All right, here we go. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. We are sponsored today by Bulletproof Coffee, which is the official drink of London Real. I just want to say thank you to Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof executive. My co-host today is Mr. Patrick Vickers, a former Goldman Sachs derivatives trader turned MMA fighter and Cage Warriors promoter. Patrick's been here for our recent episodes with writer Graham Hancock, spoken word artist Sully Breaks, and Professor David Nutt of Imperial College, who's doing some research on psilocybin. So, Patrick, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Which episode is this for you?
I think it's about 10.
It's not that many.
You keep saying that, but we're going to count them, and I bet it's 10.
All right, we'll check that. Our guest today is Mr. Dan Hardy, who is an English mixed martial arts fighter in the UFC's welterweight division, who's been fighting professionally since 2004. It's a long time. Against such guys as George St. Pierre, Carlos Condit, Dwayne Ludwig, Mike Swick, Chris Lytle. Bunch of killers, those guys. You've also participated in some ayahuasca ceremonies, and you're currently kind of facing a bit of a crossroads in your fighting career. Dan, welcome to London Real.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
No worries.
In a weird way, you're kind of like a quintessential London Real guest.
Is that right?
Yeah, because we talk about consciousness, and we had a before and after ayahuasca episode as well, where we talked about it before we did the ceremony, and we're always talking about martial arts, so it's great having you.
I'm honored to be here. I'm looking forward to
Cool,
it.
man. Thanks. You know, I was watching your Twitter feed recently, and you tweeted out, "Exhale desert, inhale home." I think it was before your flight out from Vegas.
That was just as I landed, I think.
Okay.
I may have tweeted that.
And then you said, this is a quote, "Oh, Britannia, how I have missed your fresh air and gray skies."
Yes.
I was wondering if you could tell me, what do you miss about England, and what don't you miss about England?
Oh, that's a tough question. What do I miss? Well, obviously my family are at top of the list. The fact that tea's, such a part of the culture. You walk into somebody's house, they put a mug of tea in your hand, and before you leave, there's at least one more mug of tea in there. So I'm a big tea drinker, and I just kind of get away from it when I'm outside of the UK, which I don't like. I don't like to sweat when I'm not training either. So living in Vegas is not the great place for me, because I'm already dehydrated before I got to the gym, just driving there in my truck. So I like the cold. I like the grey sky. My perfect day is a cool sunny day in England. Because so much green, so much life. Everything's growing everywhere, and people are just in a good mood. It's people are friendly, and everyone's trying to help each other. And I don't always find that everywhere else in the world.
I think, I've said this before, but a sunny day in London, I think it's the greatest city in the world.
Yeah.
It kind of blossoms. I mean, you said you were at Camden earlier today. I mean, when the sun's out, everyone's just like, it's like the flowers come out and everyone's super cool. The flip side of that is sometimes when it's raining, it can be a little down, but maybe you're used to that because you grew up here.
I don't mind the rain. I really don't. I mean, well, I have a deck at my apartment in Nottingham, and we had thunderstorms the other week, and I was just standing outside in the rain, and I did the same thing in Peru and in China when it rained, and I like being out in the rain. I think it was Billy Connolly that said there's no bad weather, it's just the wrong clothes. And I'm a big Billy Connolly fan, and that's a good quote.
I think weather's a state of mind too. If you're complaining about the weather, then you're not doing something right in your life, maybe. How long have you lived in America?
I did nearly 5 years in Los Angeles and then 2 years in Vegas up to now. Okay. And then before that, I was back and forth for 2 months here and there, and subleasing places and living on peanut butter.
If you had to explain America, and I'm American, to like an alien who landed on this planet, how would you describe the country?
It's like taking the diversity of Europe and spreading it around on one island and turning up the volume. It's like it's the extreme of everything in America, and everything's trying to be louder than the last thing. So it's a constant sensory overload.
It's people, or everything, the marketing.
Yeah, with marketing, obviously, the advertising, it creeps into everything. But the people, everyone's more animated. Everyone's so we were talking about it earlier with Eddie Bravo, how animated he is, and you wouldn't see that. We've been kind of hanging out, and we were looking at caverns the other week in Castleton and picking up crystals and rocks and stuff, and the tour guides are so different. Like this tour guide was like a Games Workshop nerd, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, and he was really cool. He was a great tour guide, very knowledgeable, but he was kind of like a little bit crass and a little bit creepy, and he didn't mind letting his personality kit come through. Whereas in America, there's a way to do that job,
Yeah.
and everyone seems naturally very good at it. I mean, obviously Disney World's got it nailed, but
That's the thing I thought of. Disneyland.
yeah, but it filters down, and like, you know, Starbucks. You walk into any of these these massive monstrous corporations, and they have everybody trained like clones.
Right, it's a pitch.
You know?
Right
Yeah,
when you walk in.
where it's a bit more individual here, but as far as the people, I guess.
Yeah, actually, Lacey was asking me what it's like to be an American in England, and I think I get like a pass because I'm American, so I'm allowed to be a little bit more brash. Because if you were English, I don't know what your experience is, but everything is a little more reserved.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You agree with that?
Yeah, well, I lived in New York for 3 years.
Oh, yeah,
New York's slightly different because it's a little bit more cosmopolitan than, say, Las Vegas, for example. But it's still, you know, I think the way that I look at America is that as you said, everything is more extreme. Look at the weather. You have a much bigger weight. It's much colder and it's much warmer.
Yeah.
There's animals that can kill you in America. There's like the most dangerous snake that we have here is like the adder, and that will give you a nasty itch, right? And we have the beast of Bodmin that roams around that nobody's ever really seen and has never hurt anyone. Where you have bears and mountain lions and, you know, genuine shit that can kill you over there. So that you know, there's a lot more. It's a lot more extreme, as you mentioned before.
I was thinking about that the other day. I was hanging out with a friend at the end of their garden. It was about midnight. We were out there looking at the stars and, you know, passing around the ceremonial joint. And I was just thinking to myself how nice it is that I just don't have to worry that there's going to be something that's going to bite my... Because I had bare feet like I do most of the time. And it was just so nice that nothing in England's going to kill me, you know. I would like the reintroduction of wolves just for my own entertainment, but other than that, I'm quite comfortable with the wildlife here.
Yeah, we got to get into. We'll get into the wolves. You know, definitely. You know, when I was like preparing for this, I remember your big rivalry. You know, with GSP before that fight, and I remember a piece of footage. Actually, I remember a statement you made where you said, "I'm more of a martial artist than he is." And I remember first thinking, okay, here's the English guy with the red mohawk. And I'm like, that's quite a thing to say to a guy that comes in the gi. You know, I mean, GSP comes in with the headband and everything, right? Kyokushin. And then they played footage of you. I think you were 11 and you were training in China.
Oh, no, I was old. It was 2000. I was 20.
20, okay.
Yeah,
and
no,
when you were in
8.
China?
You just looked 11.
Yeah.
You look really young.
Yeah. That was just how skinny and, I had my head shaved. They shaved my head because I went out there with long hair as well.
Really?
Yeah. I think I was 19. I had long hair. And I was there for like 2 days, and they sat me down and shaved my head, and I lost. I went down to like 10 stone 3 or something, which I can't even convert it to pounds.
143. 140, yeah.
Wow.
So got banker.
That's I know, that's scary. That's how he does it. So was that the start of your martial arts journey, or did it started much younger?
I started when I was 6.
Wow.
Yeah, I was into the Ninja Turtles, and I was at school, and I'm running around fighting with kids, and not really with the intention of hurting them most of the time. And it was just, my parents were like, okay, we need to find a place where he can go and do this. So Taekwondo was the most available. And I started with that, and I was doing that I did it for 17 years totally. But throughout, you know, my early teens, like from, you know, 13, 14, 15, I was starting to go to different martial arts schools and just really to find other people to train with, people to challenge me in different ways. So, because I'd like to go to like a kung fu class and, you know, do the first 40 minutes of the class. So then people in the room have started to get an idea of, you know, well, he looks like he knows what he's doing, but it's not kung fu. So then when sparring comes, everyone wants to try and take your head off and beat the new guy up. So I kind of went looking for fights in martial arts gyms and
in Nottingham.
Anywhere. But yeah, anywhere. I mean, you know, if I could get to another city, I would go with a friend and we'd travel and do different tournaments, you know, traditional jiu-jitsu and I've done all sorts, karate and judo and just different styles of kung fu. And it was just anything I could find a combative challenge, really.
How long were you with the Shaolin monks for?
Just 2 months. My intention was to go out there for 2 months and check it out, kind of get a feel for the place, and then come back and, you know, finish university and then go and do 3 years. But while I was out there, I realized that, you know, as much as I was enjoying the process of learning, the weapons and all the traditional styles that we were learning at the time, and the strictness of it, you know, the stretching and the early mornings and, you know, prolonged days of training, that was all great. But the content was no real use to me in a combative situation. So when I got back, I started to focus much more on Muay Thai. Because I really thought that I was so into Kung Fu, I saw the 36 Chambers of the Shaolin, and I was like, okay, I want to do that. sign me up 3 years, you know, with the knives on the elbows and all of it, holding the buckets of water. And I just wanted that experience. And it was good that I went to feel it out before, because it changed my journey entirely. It took me towards the actual combat side of it.
Which is what you always wanted, which is why you toured those schools, because you wanted reality. You wanted what works in sparring.
And to be honest, Thai boxing, I think, is the most brutal of all the combat sports on your body.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got elbows and knees, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Your shins get busted up, your hands get busted up, and the way that they judge it is, it's not by what you land, it's about the impact that you have on the guy. So if you stand there, take the guy's best stuff, and you don't move, it doesn't score. Whereas if I teep you and you go back, even though that's not really damaged you in any way, you've been moved and there's been an impact, and that scores very highly. So basically, if you're really tough, you can do really well in Thai boxing.
Yeah, and that was my limit for Taekwondo. That was where I started to fail, because I trained up to a point where I was fighting at 69 kilos. So I was quite skinny and lean when I was a teenager, and I was competing a lot. I was doing as many Taekwondo tournaments as I could. But then when it became an Olympic sport and they started to tweak the rules, it became much more of like a game of tag. And the way I was trained was to like walk the guy down and use punches to the body to bring his head down so I could kick him. Because it was full contact and we had no pads on our hands or feet, you couldn't punch to the head. So it was all body shots and head kicks. So I would get in the pocket and make a fight out of it. And as soon as it came to like the point scoring, the fast game of tag that they have now, which I'm not saying it's not dangerous, but it's not the fight that I was looking for.
Have you seen that viral video of those two like little Japanese kids that are doing the Taekwondo dance? They're basically fighting Taekwondo, except they never get anywhere near each other. They're doing
just crazy spinny stuff.
But they're like 6-year-old kids, and it's quite a parody of the.
Do you think the Olympics can kill a sport because it comes a point venture and then it bores the hell out of people?
Yeah, well, the problem is, as soon as it becomes a part of the Olympics, it has to be politically correct for a much wider audience. And the thing is with mixed martial arts, it's brutal. It's a brutal sport. We fight with enough padding so we don't break our hands. And the reality of it is that it's a fight. It's a full contact fight. But I don't see a reason why that can't be accepted as it is, because some people feel a pull to that. But the people that don't feel a pull to that are the ones that say that nobody else can do it either. So you add bring up the Olympics. If we added mixed martial arts to the Olympics, we would then have shin guards, bigger gloves, headgear.
The amateur.
Exactly. It changes everything.
And you couldn't have more than one bout, at a time or any of that stuff. You've been doing MMA in the UK for 10 years. I mean, you talked about the acceptance of the sport. Do you still find that you're having to justify the sport to some people when you come back home?
Less now. And I don't think it's because opinions shifted. I just think it's because people are more aware of it now, and because there was always such a huge fan base for mixed martial arts that it was just a case of getting the word out there that it was happening. But there are always going to be the people that oppose it. It was just that when it was starting up, they were more vocal because it was in a situation where they thought they might be able to affect it and shut it down. Whereas now I think it's big enough that they just kind of they just accept that it's part of their society now, So we'll always have those people that don't like other people doing what they like to do, but I think that it grows to a point where they can't stop it anymore and they just almost give up.
It's encouraging. We've had BAMA on Channel 5,
so
which is terrestrial television, which is encouraging, and you've got BT Sport, which has just kicked off. And they actually, instead of just being ESPN, which just shows the UFC and doesn't provide any commentary, they had Rosie Sexton down, John Jones, and they had a panel of guests interviewing them, and obviously that's bringing everything to the mainstream. And so the more that happens, the bigger the sport, I think, will grow, and the more acceptance that there'll be.
Yeah, and it looks like I'll be doing some work with them as well. I was speaking to Lorenzo before I left Vegas, and he seems keen to have me involved in that. So that'd be fun. Yeah, and they've just signed a deal with Virgin as well, because I know there were a lot of people annoyed that they signed with Virgin to get the UFC, and now it had switched to BT, and they weren't going to get it. So
good.
So now it's available for everybody. So that's a huge step, and that's really all we need. And that's what Lorenzo was saying, is we just need an outlet in Europe, and we need someone that's consistent, because we had Satanta, and then we had ESPN, and.
Yeah, it's hard to get here sometimes. Or it used to be hard to get.
It's also on at crazy times.
Yeah.
So it's like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. The cards begin. So obviously you have the diehards, but in terms of appealing to the masses, it's
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
I was in Australia at the end of last year, and they have more UFC and MMA on TV than they do over here, and the sport is growing exponentially because of that. Because you don't even have to show the live events. If they just repeated the UFC, up from 1 to wherever we are now, 160, every couple of days, you'd have just so many more people getting into the sport. And,
Yeah.
Well, that's what it's like in the States, right? It's on
Yeah.
like multiple cable
Yeah.
channels at the
Yeah.
same time.
And
Yeah.
so they have the same channels so they have all the Fox channels in Australia that they do in the States. So it's exactly the same program.
Yeah, see, we're missing out on all that. But BT Sports are talking about they're talking about a Tuesday night show, I think, at like 7.
Perfect. If you could get that on TV, then it's going to be then it's going to be really big for the sport, I think.
And with the frequency of the shows as well, they could do a weekly roundup now. I mean, there's so much happening, so many athletes. Even if there's not a fight at the weekend just past, there are stories from the previous weekend's fights or fighters pulling out, opponents changing.
Well, there's
a lot
Bellator,
going on.
World Series of Fighting, Cage
course,
Warriors,
yeah,
BAMMA. There's
yeah.
a load of
Yeah.
there's a load of different shows, and it's still beneficial for the UFC to get exposure to mixed martial arts as a whole, not just not just its product. I think.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to
Definitely,
see how that
definitely.
TV involves. You mentioned Lorenzo Fertitta, which people don't know is one of the owners of the UFC, and he's been a big fan of yours for a long time. And I remember him tweeting out, I'm never going to cut Dan Hardy because I love that guy because he goes to war. And this was during your 4-fight losing streak, which was, I know, a tough time for you and a tough transition in the sport. I remember you mentioning that you had tweeted something in Las Vegas, like a picture, and someone tweeted back like, "Why aren't you working on your takedown defense?" And you were like really frustrated with that. And I just wonder if you could talk us through that. I don't know, dark period, or is it dark in retrospect?
Not well. It is. I mean, it's still dark, but I'm thankful for it. It was a weird time because to start with, I never saw myself losing my first fight. I saw myself going on a winning streak straight off, and so I lost my first fight, and that was immediately a reality check. But
Your very first MMA fight?
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier.
yeah,
Okay.
but once that was out of the way, my next thing was, I'm never going to lose more than a couple of fights in a row. It's just they're just things that I just expect of myself. So, I lost the title fight. I wasn't too hard on myself for that because I wasn't expected to win. I knew I was outmatched on the night, It was just one of those things. He had the experience and the money behind him and obviously the talent, as everybody knows. So,
And in a way, you said that's a win, kind of, because you went to 5 rounds. You didn't. There wasn't that knockout. There wasn't that submission.
No. I didn't. I mean, I didn't get beat up. I didn't get damaged in any way. But I also didn't put up any real fight. I just couldn't. I was outmatched. He's a better athlete and he's a better wrestler, and he used exactly what he needed to win the fight. And I mean, people will look back on GSP as a pivotal time in the sport where it shifted and athletes started to take over. Because in 10 years' time, the sport's going to be entirely different. And when we've got guys that are, guys that would normally leave college and sign with the NFL or the NBA, and they're coming over to the UFC, then we've got a whole bunch of monsters, and that changes. But I think GSP was one of the first ones. I'm not an athlete. I've always said that I'm not an athlete. I'm a fighter that's trying to be a martial artist.
Okay. And GSP works on that explosive strength and all of that.
Yeah, and he's very linear in his approach to it as well. I mean, I've spent a couple of weeks up with him now, and see how he puts his team around him and how it's structured, and it's very direct, very linear. Did you
train with Phil Nurse?
I did. I didn't train with him. I was present while he was there, working with GSP. Really good coach.
Yeah, so he has a gym in New York, and my first ever martial arts experience was with him, just completely randomly by walking into his gym.
Nice.
But you can see the stuff that he does and how it translates through to GSP and John Jones in the actual fights. Those Superman punches followed by those sort of like rangy kicks to takedowns. I think he's quite an influential. An influential guy in the scene.
And I think that because he doesn't spend the whole training camp with them as well, he'll like come in sporadically and give them a few nuggets of information and then leave. So they have them bouncing around the head. And I think it sinks in a bit better, because obviously in training camp it's so monotonous. You're in there for like 8-12 weeks and you're seeing the same faces every day. So when you get a different person with a different voice, sometimes I think you pick it up better.
And you say linear. What do you mean by linear? As in...
Well, he's very direct. He has, he's very good at following his game plan. He's very good at knowing what he needs to do to win the fight. And it's not that I don't want to win the fight. I'm just less interested in it. I'm more interested in fighting.
Fighting, okay.
Do you think there's a difference between New George and Old George in terms of
Yeah,
the way his approach?
definitely. But I think in his earlier days he had an aggression to get to the belt. He wasn't getting the respect that he's getting now, and obviously he wasn't getting the money. I mean, GSP's not a money guy. I thought he would be when I met him, and he's not. He just loves life, and money's there as a lubricant. Basically, he just enjoys himself. But now he's respected as a successful and an accomplished athlete. So now he's not really got that aggression that he used to fight with,
And it's good to keep the belt, as we've seen recently with Anderson. I mean,
he's doing his job.
There's something about keeping the belt that's kind of nice.
Yeah,
right? And he knows
Of course. I mean, it's always better to step away and hand the belt back and say, I'm done defending it now. You can give it to somebody else. But yeah, I think GSP's winding down. I think he has a couple more challenges for himself within the sport. But other than that, I think he's done.
Do you think he'll walk away before he gets beat?
I hope so.
Okay. So sorry, I hate to bring this, but back to your losing streak. So
No worries.
was it worse and worse and worse, or was there a whole transformation going on in your head at the time?
Yeah, it's so much change because so with the GSP fight I wasn't too hard on myself. With the Condit fight, I knew I was going in there against a respected champion, but ego kind of got the better of me. We were just discussing this before we started recording. The problem was that after a title fight, the UFC generally give you quite a long gap before they schedule you another fight, to let you kind of decompress and wind down and and obviously recover if you need to. And there's usually a lot of promotional stuff to do after a title fight as well. Whether you win or lose, a lot of people are trying to get their hands on you depending on the performance. And I was quite in demand because they'd done the 3-part prime time. So I had loads and loads of people just coming up to me in the street being like, oh yeah, work on your takedown defense, and you're beating them up. And after like 3 or 4 months of this constant trickle of a little bit of wrestling, you'll be the champion, a little bit of wrestling, you'll be the champion, I came up against Condit and I was like, I'm going to run through this guy and then get to the title again. And I don't think it was quite that extreme, but that was where my ego was at the time. That was where my overconfidence was at. So in the Condit fight, it was just a case of waiting for me to land my left hook to knock him out. It's kind of how it felt when I walked in there. And I remember hitting him with a left hook, and I felt that it was a good punch. I felt that it might have hurt him. So then I think I threw like another 2 or 3 left hooks in a row, which is a schoolboy error. I was just showing him exactly what I was going to do. And because he's got, Greg Jackson in his corner, who's a good analyst, they obviously looked at my fights and were thinking, okay, left hook counters. And he just got it perfectly in the split second before I landed it. And, and after that, it was a real wake-up call, because then I realized that the thing that I thought I was good at, I could get beaten at as well, because that was my first knockout. I'd never really been outstruck before. I never really felt like I had. So then all of a sudden there's this urgency going into the next fight, like, okay, I'm 2 down now. 3 fights and you cut is generally the rule. And in my heart, I was hoping they were going to be more forgiving, because I'd fought GSP and Condit. I'm not fighting
number 1 and
bombs,
number 2.
Yeah, exactly. And then they gave me Anthony Johnson. I was like, I've got this monster to deal with now. and I remember seeing him like a couple of weeks before I got offered the fight against him at like a tap-out sign, and he was like 235.
Yeah, he looks like a linebacker for an NFL team.
He used to cut huge. Well, he's had problems cutting. Right?
Yeah.
He's fought at heavyweight now.
Yeah, broke Arlovsky's Jordan.
Yeah.
So he was a beast, and you were like...
Well, so the problem was that
it was a lay and pray, basically.
Yeah, well, we had this conversation going back and forward on private message on Twitter, because we've been friends, and I always had this joke, like every time I saw him, I'd make a joke about his weight, like are you still in my weight class, or something like that. And we were always quite good friends. We always got on, and so we had this kind of back and forth on Twitter, especially when Tito had pulled out and they brought in Phil Davis. We were like, okay, we're gonna steal the show. We want to make an impact to steal the show and have a war. And I was thinking, he's a big puncher. I've just been knocked out. He's thinking, okay, I'm gonna knock this guy out again. So I kind of put all my eggs in one basket and thought we're gonna have a brawl. And I was just gonna stay active and wear him out and wait for his weight cut to catch up with him, and then beat him up. That was my plan. Or even catch a submission, because he kind of gives up when he gets tired, as far as like his takedown defense. and he just punked me. He nailed me. It was great. It was perfect because he came out and he knew exactly what he was going to do, and I knew he cut weight hard because I'd said a lot in the media about him not making weight, about me not expecting him to make weight. So then I was thinking that would put extra emphasis on him cutting the weight, and then he'd exhaust himself for the fight. This was my thinking behind it. This is how you deal with a guy that's far too big for the weight class. Right. And I'd seen him weight cut, and he cut weight Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, and Friday morning.
In the sauna?
Yeah, sauna in. I had one guy tell me that they saw him laying in the elevator on the way back up to his room on like Wednesday night.
Jesus.
So I knew he was exhausted, and so I was thinking, okay, this is going to work out. I've got a good feeling about this. And then in the fight, there was a stumble. He knocked me with a good head kick. I was kind of off balance, and then when I got back to my feet, if I remember it right, he kind of rushed me with a takedown. I landed on my thumb and dislocated it. And then it took me a little while because I had to like kind of get my thumb moving and working again because I was working a lot of kimuras. That was one of my game plans if I was on the bottom. And he was just so strong. It was just twisting out of the kimura. And the problem was that then I'm on the bottom and I'm carrying like, it was 210, 214 on the night. So I'm like carrying a huge amount of weight and trying not to take too much damage. So then I was getting tired at the same time and I was just exhausted by the end of the first round. And it was just, and I just kind of, I think I just kind of gave up in my head.
Was it like watching a bad movie where you're like, this isn't happening, but this is happening?
Yeah, and I really didn't feel like I could do a great deal about it. And in the last round, there was a moment where I thought, I'm just going to go for it. And I think I just started throwing. And he engaged me for a second, but by that point, I had nothing left.
Okay. You talked about the media, like about getting in his face or making fun of him. I mean, you were notorious for getting kind of GSP riled up, and then you called Marcus Davies the fake Irishman, which, like in the U.S., they might be like, "What do you mean?" But like, we understand what you're talking about in the U.K. because there's Irish people, and then there's everyone in America who says they're Irish on St. Patrick's Day, and then they go back to being whatever they are normally. But I mean, how much of that is your game plan? Because you don't really seem like that guy. No. So is it all a fabrication? Is it something you plan on?
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, fans have kind of a weird view of this. Like now, if I say yes, it's all fabrication, then they think I've like done them wrong in some way. But it's not. It's game plan. I'm fighting. As soon as I've signed the contract, I'm at war with this guy. So any way I can get inside his head and kind of like weaken him a little bit, I'll do it. And Marcus Davies is a very, very passionate Irishman. I mean, he wasn't born in Ireland, but obviously, he's got ancestry from there, and he's passionate about it. And I don't have a problem with that. People can claim whatever heritage they want. It makes no difference to me. But because I knew he was so passionate about it, I knew that it was going to be something that he would.
He
bit on that one.
Yeah,
and so it affected his performance.
It did. It made him more aggressive. And there are two different Marcus Davies. There's the Marcus Davies that comes to grapple, and the Marcus Davies that comes to strike. And if you watch him against someone like, was it Jay Tan who fought in Liverpool?
He beat Jess Leo down by a big knockout, but I think that was in Newcastle.
Was it? And he fought Jason Tan as well, one of Jason Tan's only fights in the UFC. And there was somebody else he fought. And you can tell that he shows up looking more like a boxer. He doesn't look quite as muscular. He looks leaner and smaller and quicker. And they're the fights he normally knocks people out. So, and I thought that obviously because I was known for not being a particularly good grappler, I thought that he would, again, invest in a grappling heavy takedown and show up looking very muscular and strong like he does when he's got a grappling game plan, which he did. So when I saw him at the weigh-ins, I was like, okay, it's worked. He's going to grapple, which in the first round he did. So there are different, like you can kind of, it's kind of like striking. Like if I'm standing in front of somebody and I've got a flat wall behind them, and I'm standing directly in front, they've got a 50-50 option of which way to go. If I step to my left, even an inch, immediately that side looks more enticing. So you can do that with fighters' game plans as well. I'm giving away all my tricks now, but I'm effectively retired, which I'm sure you're going to want to talk about.
It's funny you should say that.
No, I'm not. No, not at all. Anyway, so that was all I do. I just see how I can like influence their options a little bit.
Okay.
And so I can kind of play up the fact that I'm not a very good grappler, or talk about the fact that I want to stand and trade and have a war.
Right.
And
even though in secret you're training
Yeah.
10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu and all that
I
stuff.
used it really well.
Your last fight, you were taking the guy down in like rounds
Yeah.
2 and 3,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that surprised him. But I used it early days, Cage Warriors against Matt Thorpe. I was fighting him for the world title, first world title shot. I was so nervous, and Matt Thorpe's like 6'4", and he's good at everything. You know, he's a good grappler, he's a good striker, he's got good kicks and knees, and I was predominantly a striker, and I knew that they would bank on that. So I took him down for 5 rounds and just held on to him and beat him up, and I didn't do a great deal of damage, but I won the belt. But that was the same thing, because like, you know.
But as soon as if you're known as a striker and you start taking people down,
Yeah.
they think as soon as you shoot, they drop their hands, and then you can clock them. So it's just another string to your bow, right?
Yeah.
And it sows uncertainty in their mind.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so fourth loss. How's
Yeah.
your mentality, and what are you thinking now? Yeah.
Well, my approach, my mentality before the fight is more telling, really, because after the Anthony Johnson fight, I got back to the dressing room and I sat on the floor with my hand in a bucket of ice, and I looked at my striking coach Steve and I said, "That's it, I'm done. I'm not enjoying it anymore. This is not fun for me anymore. I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm just getting damaged." So I was just like, I'm over it. And he said, like all coaches would, take some time, have a think about it, you know, let it settle in, let the swelling go down. But I'd already started planning for other things, like in my head, even before the Anthony Johnson fight, just to kind of stay relaxed in the fight. I was trying to think, if this doesn't go right, what are my other options? Because I'd never really thought about it before. I was going to be the UFC champ. That was the goal. That was the goal when I signed with the UFC. Not before the UFC. It was to be a UFC fighter. I had to kind of reconfigure my approach. But anyway, so I was done. I'd given up, and I'd already been looking at things that I was going to do after. I wanted to go back to university and study philosophy. I had a list of places that I wanted to travel. You know, different experiences that I wanted to have, and different things that I wanted to do, because mixed martial arts in general has been very, very productive for me, and it's given me a lot of good connections. I've met a lot of good people from it, but the actual sport of mixed martial arts is quite destructive. You know what I mean? And I'll be like listening to Simon and Garfunkel or walking around an art gallery, and I'm like, well, these people just created something that was powerful and beautiful, or a good book or whatever. And I felt that I kind of want to like
Create
leave something better.
destroy.
Yeah, leave something more of a contribution than, because the way I look at it is like this, and this was something that came up a lot when I was in Peru. There's no point to any of this.
Yeah.
You know, like the UFC, there's no point to it. And if you look at the champions, and this is by no means meant to be an insult to anybody, but they're all very linear in what they're doing. They don't think outside of the box, you know? They learn martial arts, they eat right, and they thank Jesus. And you know what I mean? And it's very much, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. And in my head, I've always been kind of, oh, that over there and that over there, you know what I mean? So I've never been...
It's probably quite difficult to be a champion, though, if you're not intensely focused.
No doubt. So that's why I've kind of put it to one side. But
Was the ayahuasca something planned before your fourth loss?
that was my treat after the Ludwig fight.
Right.
Regardless of how it went, I knew that the ayahuasca experience was going to help me with what came next, whether it was to continue fighting or to do something else.
Do you think the fact that you had actually already convinced yourself you were going to go on that journey helped you at peace at that fight? You know, helped you relax in that fight? That you had made a decision, I'm going to go.
I think so. And the thing was, I wasn't really fighting for myself then, because the title fight and all the fights up until the Lytle fight were for me. I wanted to win. You know, I wanted to be better and to be more successful. With the Lytle fight, I just wanted to fight. I wasn't even interested in winning. I didn't go in there with any real intention of winning. Obviously, I wanted to. There's no doubt. You always go into a fight wanting to, but I wasn't making the decisions to win the fight. I was making the decisions to have a fight, because the Anthony Johnson had bored the life out of me so much, and I really felt like I'd wronged the fans in some way, because I'd not given the performance that they wanted. And I had fans that had travelled from all over the US, from the UK as well, that had flown to
Styles
Seattle
make fights, right? So if someone's not prepared to stand in front of you, then you can't do your thing.
But at the same time, at the same time, as a mixed martial artist, it's my responsibility to create that fight as well. Like I can't, and this was always a misconception when I never complained about wrestlers using wrestling to win fights. Like I feel if I got taken down, it's my responsibility to get back up and get myself in a situation where I can win the fight. But at the same time, I don't think a wrestler should use wrestling to hide from the fight, which to a certain extent in that fight I felt like Anthony Johnson did. It was the easiest thing for him to do to win the fight, and he knew how close he was to losing his job, so he made the right decision. I'm still friends with him, we're still cool, but that was a decision that he made. Whereas with the Lytle fight, I wanted to fight. I just wanted to go in there and just feel that adrenaline.
But also a great opponent for you to do that as well, right?
And a great opponent, yeah.
He bangs, he's got great submissions, but he's not a big, heavy, middleweight posing as a welterweight.
No.
And you have nothing to lose. It's your fourth, so if it's a loss, you're gone. And
this was it. And I'd already okay, September I'm going to go back to university, and I had things I was planning, and then when Lorenzo tweeted and he said that they were keeping me. And then the backlash from that small cultish group of fans that demand fighters' heads on a spike when they lose too many fights. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, now I need to fight to prove Lorenzo made the right decision. This is not about me winning fights anymore. Now I'm kind of on borrowed time. And that was where I was at going into the Ludwig fight. Like, I'm on borrowed time. So if this works out, then great. And if it don't, all the plans that I've got in the pipeline just fall into place straight after.
Talk about out of the box. Now you have all these other options.
And fight of the night follows.
Yeah.
Great fight. And Ludwig is no joke, and he's famous now as the head trainer of Alpha Male, and now he's getting like so many kudos and stuff. So, all right, let's talk psychedelics a little bit.
Okay.
We about 2 weeks ago we released an episode called DMT Before and After, and we basically filmed here with myself and an ayahuasca filmmaker our thoughts on DMT. We went and smoked DMT. We came back and told people what happened. And then about a week later, I released a training video of me training with an MMA fighter named Peter Irving, just me kicking pads and stuff. And somebody tweeted, they're like, wait a second, you do psychedelics and then you want to beat the living shit out of something? And I was like, yeah, they go hand in hand, in my opinion. But can you explain why you wanted to go drink ayahuasca? And then after you drank ayahuasca, you went back into the cage and got another win. And can you explain that to people? Is there something strange there, or is that?
It's difficult. It's very difficult to explain ayahuasca to someone that's never like had a psychedelic experience. I mean, how do you explain psychedelia? It's out there. But the thing is, like, ayahuasca doesn't necessarily do anything to change the person. It just helps the person understand who they are, so they can make the changes themselves. So, like, I still like fighting. I still feel aggressive and get angry, and the psychedelic experiences have not changed that. They just help me understand it and help me distinguish between that cross chatter between the different parts of my brain, where the reptilian brain's going, yeah, go and hit him, he deserves it, and my higher consciousness is like, no, come on, no one's gonna like that. That's the stupid thing to do, and everyone's gonna be upset, and you're gonna look like the asshole. So like now I can hear this cross chatter and I can choose which one's the best. Whereas before, everything was fighting. It was all fighting, and they were the decisions that I was making without thinking about it. So all the ayahuasca ceremonies did was just help me connect with the different parts of my personality and help me understand what each part needs. What do I need to do to feed Reptile, and what is my higher consciousness going to need to level up again to keep evolving.
And you talked about you want to get more in touch with the reptilian part of your brain, because I think you even said when you're in a fight and you're in your reptilian brain is the perfect thing. Almost like you said, no mind earlier in that Tom Cruise movie. And do you think psychedelics or meditation is a way to get there further?
No doubt. Yeah, there are different ways of doing it, obviously, but like for me, psilocybin is one of the most powerful and useful tools for that kind of thing. Because, and Terence McKenna talks a lot about how the integration of psilocybin into the diet affected people's edge and depth perception. So they were more able to survive.
And hunt, and this is part of the stoned ape theory and
Exactly,
everything. I'm just curious, have you ever trained on low doses, and have you ever noticed that?
I have.
Okay.
I have.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm every subject's on the table, so feel free to ask away. And I have an interest in actually trying it during a fight. I would like a gram and a half to see the difference. But then again, that might be an unfair advantage. You never know.
Is it legal? Is it illegal?
I'm sure it's not on the banned list.
I'm sure it's not on the.
I'm sure that's
because
on
no
the
one.
ban
I
list.
bet they wouldn't even know what it was.
I mean,
they just think you were crazy for doing it. I think
it's
like,
fascinating.
whatever.
I mean,
Does it affect like your respiratory system or your heart rate or anything like that?
No, not at all.
I had a psilocybin experience a few months ago, and I remember looking at my iPhone because I was playing music, and it was all of a sudden in HD, and it was in the first 30 minutes, and I noticed all the little details. And I was like, that's what Terrence is talking about.
Yeah.
Low dose makes you a better hunter. Medium dose, you don't think about hunting anymore. You know? So there's a fine line.
And high dose, heroic dose.
5
is-
grams.
Yeah, that's
Is
where
that
I
what it's
go.
known as? Heroic dose.
Heroic
Yeah.
dose. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Terrence McKenna's theory is high doses vary infrequently, and I completely agree with him. So if it's psilocybin, 5 grams dried, go really big, learn about yourself, apply that maybe in your life for the next 6 months, as opposed to let's take some mushrooms and go to a rock concert. Now, not that I have anything wrong with that, but also Terrence says do it at your house alone in the dark, and I kind of agree with that too. Of course, ayahuasca is kind of a corollary on that because you're doing it with a shaman in a group
Yep.
in the jungle. So
Generally.
you have experience with both. Is there one you prefer, or do you find one slightly different? I find ayahuasca to be more Avatar for me. It's like more about the community and how I love
That's
and
in a
feel.
heroic dose then.
I mean,
Ayahuasca is always a heroic dose.
you're usually given enough where you're going to go there. But I just find I'm more of like Mother Earth and community, and psilocybin.
Yeah.
I still have parts of that, but I'm sorry, I'm interviewing you.
No.
What are your experiences when those two? There's no diet with psilocybin either, so.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean there shouldn't be.
Okay.
With ayahuasca, it's much less of a frequent thing. I think I've had 6 ceremonies now, 3 of which were in Peru, and they each one's very, very different. But I prefer psilocybin. I prefer it if I'm honest, because I'm much more of a solitary person. I like to have a powerful experience like that on my own, where I've got a hold of the circumstance that I'm in. And I mean, we did a ceremony a little while back, and there was a guy in the corner that had a bottle of water, and it was one of those like shitty plastic bottles that's not got any structure, and he had one of those, and he had the wrapper on it, and just that, like 4 hours into the ceremony, he reached over to grab it, and like as he's undoing it, not even thinking about it, he's undoing it to take a drink. The crackling and rustling immediately just like
Brought
pulled
you
me
back to
away
reality.
from where I was at, and so to a certain extent there is a benefit in having that in those ceremonies, because it also brings up other things that you need to assess. You need to, I mean, like I did a ceremony recently with 32 people.
Wow.
And it was, I mean, there were like families there, and it was awesome, and it was such a cool environment. First time I've had a day ceremony as well.
Really?
Because usually they're at night indoors. This was daytime outside.
In what country?
I'd rather not say.
I didn't even know they did daytime ceremonies. I
Yeah.
just assumed it was always nighttime. So.
Yeah.
Do you feel a group energy? I've never done it in groups.
Yeah.
You feel like a collective.
Yeah,
Okay.
and different groups and different environments are very unique as well. Like my experiences in Peru were, that was much more of a solitary experience, because I had space. We were in it was a big wooden building called a maloca, and we were effectively, most of it was net, so we were effectively right outside anyway, and it was in the jungle. It was silent apart from all the wildlife, and I had plenty of space. And in Peru, obviously it's very accessible, so they just give you a mug full, and you just drink and drink and drink, and then there's a second dose if you want it, and a third dose, and they really push the envelope in Peru. Whereas here it's a little bit more of have a shot and see how you go.
Okay.
But they're different, and the medicine's different every time as well, depending on who's made it, and I mean there must be so many different things that change it. But for me, like with the psilocybin, I can spend a weekend with psilocybin and have just a power weekend. Just feel like I've leveled up. It's like a video game. I've just jumped a level, because like my whole weekend becomes about the ceremony, and I don't wake up. See, this is the thing with the party thing. Like there are circumstances, like I'll go hiking, I'll have a gram or two and go hiking and just, you know, take my shoes off and stand in the water and just touch the leaves and just be connected, be grounded. And it's very, very good for that. It helps me appreciate what I don't see right in front of my face sometimes. Whereas with the heroic dose, I have it like 11:30 at night, and it's coming on at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and I have my music set up, and I've got my crystals and my candles, my joints rolled, and I'm ready to go, and I've got everything I need. So then for the first 2 or 3 hours, I'm not present anyway. You know, and then as it starts to come out, I have a little routine. I like to, you know, first thing I do when I'm starting to connect with my space again, I'm starting to become more conscious. I'll sit up, I'll kneel, and I'll sit in front of a mirror. And this is where I start working on this connection with reptile thing. Because the weird thing is, when I look at myself in the mirror during one of these ceremonies, I don't recognize myself as such. I understand that this is the body that I'm in, but I don't really feel like I have any necessary ownership over it. It's just the vessel that's helping me experience this life. So I don't see myself, I don't recognize myself until I look right into the black in my eyes. And then it's like, oh, there I am. It's really weird, and I get it now because I've experienced it altered. But before, I look at myself and I can look at my house, my hand is my hand, and, you know, and I recognize myself, but with those situations, it's very different.
Because your ego is so dissolved.
Yeah, and because you're so aware of all the other the extremities of the reality that we're in as well. I can't think of a better way of explaining it. But
and this is an experience you can repeat, which is unlike ayahuasca. It's more of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
You don't know who's around you, but when you're at home with psilocybin, this is a kind of a pattern you can kind of.
I can focus my intention. And Terence McKenna really helps with the setup of it as well. So like my day, like before set, and I always select the day. I would never wake up on the day and be like, okay, I've got nothing to do today. I'm gonna eat some mushrooms. I like to plan it out, so I make sure I've got the weekend clear and that there's gonna be nobody bugging me, and you know. And I wake up on the Saturday morning and I'll do like a Bikram yoga session, or I'll run. I like to get a good sweat and a good workout, so my body feels very open and very clean. And then I'll have 2 small vegan meals, just something light. And then I'll fast for 4 or 5 hours, and then have them at about 11 o'clock. And then, so by 1 or 2 o'clock, I'm right where I need to be. 3 or 4 o'clock, I'm sitting in front of the mirror, smoking a joint, like thinking about the things that I've experienced. And marijuana, they go hand in hand. And I know a lot of people talk about ayahuasca and marijuana being very separate, and I don't necessarily feel the same.
Okay.
Which we can talk about as well. But yeah, but there's kind of a process, and then I start to feel hungry, and then it's Brazil nuts and bananas. That's my post ceremony snack. But at this, I'm still very much in it. I mean, after a heroic dose, you feel it for 6, 7, 8 hours. But I've got Pink Floyd on, or my girlfriend Lacey's got me into Future Primitive recently, and if you've not heard Future Primitive, it's DMT music. It's amazing.
Okay. What's the heroic dose for you?
5's good.
Okay.
5's good. I've tried more, but it didn't really enhance it in any way.
It's interesting how you talk about the low dose on your hikes, because when you take a big dose, it's just so much information that you're not really in the present anymore for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So you can't appreciate the little things.
Yeah.
I play Terence when I'm coming back down, and
Okay.
I play the same Terence track I've listened to 10 times, and I hear completely different things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah. But it's just my little ritual.
Yeah. See, I like Pink Floyd was made for psilocybin, in my opinion. I mean, I can listen to Dark Side of the Moon 10 times through and cry through all of it, and it's overwhelming. But at the same time, like it depends on what I'm trying to achieve, because it's not like I'm doing it for fun. Because I always get anxious, and it's always like, okay, this could be a rough one tonight. Because sometimes it is. Sometimes it takes you to a place that you might be hiding from.
You should be scared before you do this. I mean, people say they're scared before an ayahuasca ceremony. I'm like, you should be scared. I mean,
but that's part of the respect, and that's the most important thing. It's the approach to it. It's the respect. So like my weekend being dedicated to it. So my Saturday I like cleanse myself and I make sure my body's clean and empty and open, ready for the and then I get 5 grams and grind it up and mix it into orange juice, like nice organic fresh orange juice, and then 30 minutes later it's like it's starting to speak.
You're quite open about this stuff, but you're still a UFC fighter and a UFC representative. I mean, you're going to be doing TV and things like that for them. Is that a conscious decision you made, or look, I am going to be out of the psychedelic closet?
I just don't. We were actually talking about this earlier in Camden. I don't see the point in being closed with anything, because my intention with life is to have as much experience as possible, to connect with as many people as possible. So like if I hadn't have said, oh yeah, I went to Peru and had ayahuasca, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. So unless someone comes and takes me away and locks me up, I don't really see any reason why not to be. And all I'm saying then is I'll talk about it and tell everybody about it, and you just got to come and fetch me if they lock me up. That's my deal. So I don't mind talking about it. It's not, as Terence said, if you hide your stash, you're doing the man's work for him. And I'm not doing the man's work for him.
We had Rick Doblin sitting there who runs MAPS, which is a foundation started in '86 that's been trying to get MDMA legal for PTSD sufferers and stuff. And that's the last bit of advice he gave is like, if everyone just came out of the closet and told your coworker that I do this and it's okay and everything. And that was the one thing he said. Yeah. More than politicians or anything.
Yeah.
So
the problem is we have to work so hard right now. It's just like mixed martial arts. We had to work so hard in the beginning to establish some kind of respect for it, some kind of acceptance, because it was kind of out of the mainstream and people weren't sure about it, and there was blood and and it's the same with this, like psilocybin. And I always try and say psilocybin or mushrooms. I don't use magic mushrooms.
I hate that phrase.
Yeah,
I hate that phrase.
The problem is, like, you say magic mushrooms and everyone thinks, oh,
they giggle.
You down it with a beer and go and have a laugh, and it's to be respected. It's a medicine and there's a process to it, So like, as I was saying, so like as it's starting to wind down, then I've got my notepad out and I'm drawing and writing and making as many notes as I can while it's still fresh in my mind. And then I'll go and meditate, and that will take me very much back into that space again until 5, 6 in the morning when the sun's starting to come up. And then I like to do kettlebells or go and run a trail, because at this point it's starting to wind down. So you're about the same. You're about as altered as you would be if you had a couple of grams, gram and a half. So by the time I'm out at the trail that I want to run, I'm right where I need to be to run this trail and feel like the Hulk. It's really weird because I run up the trail and I've got my music playing and I go through different phases of listening to stuff that's really heavy. Like I like Meshuggah. They're very like heavy, like they're a Swedish metal band, and it's like math metal, so it's like really weird beats and stuff, and it's just constant. It keeps me going. And again, Future Primitive is a good one to use. And Massive Attack, I never thought I would run to Massive Attack, but I use that quite a bit now. And then like binaural beats, they're quite good. It's just like you can get different types that communicate with different brain waves, but that kind of stuff's very good. It's just one more thing I can shut out is the noise from the outside, the birds and the people talking and stuff, and I just get down this trail at full speed, and sometimes I eat shit, and that's part of the fun. But I can feel I feel so aware and so connected. I know where my foot's going next, and I know that when it lands there, the kind of stability that it's got, there's much more of a presence there than I experience normally, which I don't get that connectedness in any other experience other than. I never got that connectedness before I had these experiences, and now I'm aware of it. I can do it to a certain extent, but not to the same extent as I could if I did have some in my system, for sure.
And how often are you doing these things? Is it very infrequently, or does it depend?
It varies. I've been jumping around quite a bit recently. It's been like kind of ayahuasca, San Pedro, psilocybin, ayahuasca, just kind of back and forth, but at least once a month.
Do you think you get desensitized to it?
No.
Your tolerance grows towards it?
With psilocybin, there is a tolerance, which is, I don't know the science behind it, but I know it's about a week. But out of respect, I wouldn't do it back to back anyway, which is why I'm kind of on the fence about DMT, which would be another good thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Because it is synthesized, it goes through a process. You don't earn it like you do ayahuasca.
Interesting.
You know
I found the DMT to be I call it the crack cocaine of psychedelics, which is a horrible thing to say, but I was up and back down, but I
Yeah.
didn't have any deep, meaningful lessons of
Yeah.
things I needed to change in my life. I felt like I was shown something and then I was back. So I honestly wasn't rushing back to it because I didn't feel like I had to do that pain and do that hard work.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, with ayahuasca, there's an understanding of the process that comes with it. So, the ayahuasca diet, which is very, very restrictive. If you stick to it,
It's hard.
as they want you to, it is a very restrictive diet. And then there's the ceremonial aspect of it, which, and I don't like all the paraphernalia that comes with it, I'll be honest, because you see this quite consistently in ceremonies, and particularly Westerners gravitate towards the paraphernalia, all like the Quechuan stuff and the Peruvian, and they've got like a blanket in front of them with all kinds of trinkets and crystals and sage and just piled on top, and it doesn't annoy me. I mean, it's to each their own, but I do feel like that kind of makes a little bit of a religion out of it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the actual ceremonial aspect itself and the process of the Icaros singing and the shaman coming around working on different people and the ceremonies I've been doing recently, there have been 2, sometimes 3 or 4 people that go around and work with different people in the group. Because I've been in like very concentrated like ayahuasca groups, and they're like, there's like apprentices, and it's a very, very cool network, and everyone's helping each other. Whereas with Peru, it was the shaman and the people that were,
Right.
that were the patients effectively.
So you could have multiple people coming over
Yeah.
and working on you, and
Yeah.
you like that.
I did like that because everyone offers something different. I mean, there was a guy in one of them that just plays the didgeridoo, and it was awesome. I mean, like as soon as he started playing that didgeridoo, it took me to an entire different place, and it was really, really energizing. And as soon as he stopped, it was like I kind of sat up and started to look for where the sound had gone. I know that sounds stupid, but you know what I mean. You kind of like, especially because the room's pitch black, you can't see a thing. But the ceremonial aspect of it is important. The respect that you have to give the plant,
We talked about it with Graham Hancock, and he thinks there's a very strong link between religion and psychedelics.
Yeah.
And the experience that you get is a religious one, even if you don't believe in sort of traditional views of gods.
Yeah. But you see, so like when somebody says religion, that is like saying Walmart. You know what I mean? Like Catholicism is Asda. Because basically what they've done is they've taken what they think people want and they've packaged it in a way that's accessible. So you can go and get your fix once a week at church, and you can be nice to those people for those 2 hours, and then you can yell at them from your car the next day. You know what I mean? And there's no real integration with religion. Whereas it's a spiritual experience. But for me, spirituality is a personal journey anyway. So I don't need to go to the same building once a week and speak to the same people once a week and read the same book as those people to get this, because that might not be right for me. But everyone's kind of told that that's what's right to do, so that's what they do.
Well,
So
Terrence always said that the beauty of is that it was an experience, and it was pure that way.
Yeah.
And so no one can tell you that you just have it, and it's yours and personal.
exactly. And if you go through most of the, Graham Hancock's the best person to talk to about this. But if you go through like most of the religious books and ancient cultures and stuff, there's a heavy presence of what could potentially be psychedelics. I mean, in any environment, and every culture's got their own altering substance.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the Western world, we gravitate to alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine, which really don't do a great deal for you. Well, alcohol
Certainly nothing constructive, really.
No, exactly. I mean, caffeine can be used as a good training tool if you're using it right, but a Starbucks a day is not going to help you at all. And you might enjoy it, but other than that, it's not going to elevate you in any way. Whereas you go to South America and there's ayahuasca and salvia and mushrooms and and there's iboga and numerous amounts of it. And then you go way out to the Far East, and they're doing the same kind of things with self-flagellation and meditation and fasting and vision quests. This is another thing that people don't talk about a lot. I read a book called Grandfather by Tom Brown Jr., and it was about a Native American medicine man that kind of taught him the skills that he had, all of the survival skills, and some of the stories about this guy like going on vision quests where he's like wandering for 3 weeks with no clothes or anything.
What is a vision quest?
It's basically just a kind of isolation. You just kind of you basically cast out of your tribal group. You're sent away into the wilderness to survive, to fend for yourself. Occasionally you'll have something to keep you warm. Occasionally you would have a knife, but the hardcore way of doing it is just to wander out into the desert with your bare ass and figure it out.
It's like Batman Begins.
Yeah, exactly.
They train shamans that way a little bit in Peru with the young ones that just like go and you come back for some ayahuasca and then go.
And give them little doses every day and leave them on their own as well. And plant dietas. That's another thing that again, see, there's so much to this culture. It's not just like, magic mushrooms and DMT. There's like a whole wealth of stuff that's all connected. And like the plant dietas where you would diet a plant for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And this is like being on the ayahuasca diet for a prolonged period of time. No sugar, no salt, no sex, no spice, no fun, none of the stuff that people kind of reach for to make them comfortable.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you would focus on one particular plant, and you would then integrate that into your diet with the hopes of taking on the lessons from that plant. And if you think of the variety and nature of plants that we've got, there must be so many more, psychedelic plants out there, and so many plants that you could just integrate into your diet that you would glean something from. Even if it's just like marijuana, and it just helps you be nice to people for the day.
Yeah, you talked about how that some people say it's a female energy, and so is ayahuasca, and they don't combine. Mm-hmm. Do you agree or do you disagree?
Well, this was something that kept coming up for me because I don't ever like to feel like I'm doing something because I want to do it, solely because I want to do it. I don't eat Chinese food because it doesn't do anything for me other than the fact that I like to eat it until I've finished it and I regret it. So I don't want to be the guy that smokes marijuana because he likes to smoke it. I want to smoke it because it's a medicine and I have that respect for it. And people get away from this quite a lot with all kinds of teacher plants, and it's listening to your inner guardian and knowing when it's right to say, I don't need it right now.
Well, Graham Hancock said he was basically abusing it for 24 years.
Yeah,
but will you not eat a chocolate bar?
I don't.
But will you not have sex?
Oh, I would have sex. Yeah.
But that's the same thing, isn't it?
But it's not, no, because sex, one, is a very organic thing, and two, is a good way of connecting to that euphoric space that you get from psychedelics and connecting to the reptilian brain. So there's a lot going on during sex.
So it's not just for pure enjoyment.
No.
You think you learn something from it as well.
Yeah, for sure. If it's with the right person, anyway.
Back to marijuana really quick, and then I'm going to start talking wolves.
Okay.
So so you think marijuana should be something that's taken seriously and used as a plant teacher, as opposed to just self-medicating?
Yeah.
It's very big in the U.S. now. I think we don't have a good. Like, what was it? Some fighter tested positive, and he was like, "Everyone smokes weed in California."
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, yeah. It's very widespread. I felt really bad for Pat Healy. He beat me right early on in my career.
He won $150,000 of bonuses.
Oh yeah,
and then he failed his test and he had to give it back. And you've got to think, 150 grand to a guy that's just, I don't know how many fights in he is, but maybe he's earning 15 and 15 or something like that. That's so much money.
He deserved that money as well because he's been at it for a long time. But the thing is, the most frustrating thing is that like a week or two later, then they adjusted the limits. So then he wouldn't have tested positive.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I know they've adjusted them recently from 50 to 150 of whatever unit it is.
Does that bother you, or do you just kind of say that's just the way it is right now, and I have to work within those guidelines when it comes to state commissions and stuff like that?
It is what it is. I'm not a part of the UFC because I have to be. I'm there because I want to be, and there's a set of rules that are laid out to be a part of that, and I choose to abide by those rules. And I understand that there are drug testing. Whether I agree with it or not is beside the point. Because I'm choosing to be in that environment, I accept what's on the table.
And with marijuana, you just try to treat it as a teacher and respect it.
Yeah, and going back to the ayahuasca thing, the ayahuasca diet, whatever's written on it, is not necessarily written for everybody. It's not, Lacey does a lot of yoga, and her experience with ayahuasca is that if she doesn't keep some salt in her diet, she's dehydrated all the time, and then obviously that affects the experience. So it's got to be adaptable, but you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be like, I need salt because I need salt, not I need salt because these chips are kind of bland. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. It's not what you do, it's the intention. And my intention is not to smoke marijuana because I want to smoke it. My intention after a ceremony is to smoke it because it helps me put all the pieces into place.
And how long have you walked this path? You were never like a Nottingham lad that would go to the pub and get in fights and then go and eat bad food, or?
I did for a couple of years in my teens, yeah, because I stopped drinking at just before I turned 18. So it's 13 years now. So I kind of had 2 years where I did that, like 15 to 17. I just kind of put my foot on the gas and just went nuts, and
And you made a conscious decision to stop?
Yeah, it just
because of your career.
It wasn't suiting me. I was making bad decisions because alcohol tends to bring out the reptile in everybody.
And makes, like, it's the ultimate bad decision maker.
Yeah, it is.
Alcohol.
Yeah, but that's the reptilian brain. He's the bad decision maker.
The one you want to get closer to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can make the right decisions in certain situations.
Yeah, well, he's very useful. He's very, very useful in some circumstances.
In critical, crucial situations.
Yeah, but I've got to know when to listen to him and when to not.
Yeah, when to turn him on.
Yeah.
When to turn him off.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
exactly.
You were down in Peru, and I remember you saw like a spirit animal, and it was almost like a premonition because it was a wolf.
Kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
And there's something else weird as well.
Okay.
Is about my nickname. My nickname's the Outlaw, which we were talking about, and it came completely organically to me. I didn't really pick it for any other reason other than it was kind of fitting at the time. I was training with a guy who I wasn't really connecting with very well, so I left, and he called all my training partners to tell them they couldn't train with me. So I'd been outlawed, and that's where it came from. That's the obviously the Robin Hood thing ties in. But if you
Dan's from Nottingham, which is where Robin Hood's from, in case anyone doesn't know.
And my Outlaw Army shirts, one of the Outlaw Army shirts, it says Outlaw Army across the front. It's got a big fist on the back. Across the bottom, it has a scroll, and it says, and I usually get it wrong, it's Caput Gerat Lupinum. It's Latin, and that's the law for outlaw. Let his be the head of a wolf.
Yeah.
That's what outlaw means. It's so outlaws were called wolf heads. Huh. So, and I didn't know this until I was reading it was a Robin Hood comic book. And it was like right inside, and the first thing that it said, "Let his be the head of a wolf." So
it's a weird coincidence. So you fight in California, and they hook an EKG up to you, which is probably the only state that does that. Perhaps.
Yeah, I think maybe Florida as well.
And that was the first time you fought in California.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they give you some interesting news.
I'm abnormal.
Big surprise.
Big surprise. Yeah.
So I guess they call it Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, and it's, correct me if I'm wrong, an abnormal electrical pathway in the heart. And while instances of fatality are extraordinarily low, they're concerned. Is that what it is? So it's kind of an extra heartbeat in there, or just some,
yeah. And it's quite common. I was surprised how common it was. About 1 in every 1,000 people have it in some capacity, and a lot of people are born with it, and the extra cells die off in the first couple of years of birth, after birth, sorry. But most people don't ever find out about it because they don't have any symptoms. And I'm in this boat. I've never had symptoms, and dizziness, palpitations, panic attacks. There's all kinds of stuff that could potentially happen because of it. But a lot of people live their whole life without having any idea. And that's not called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. That's called Wolff-Parkinson-White pattern. And that's what I have. Okay. But the difference is, and I don't know whether this is partly to do with the fact that I've been an athlete for so long and I've always been in an active state. But I have my regular heartbeat, which is very strong, and I'm always in fairly good shape. So when I went and did the test, my resting heart rate was 42. And it maxed out at 191. But usually in these circumstances, the second heartbeat, the second bunch of cells is quite sporadic and quite weak, but mine's quite powerful. So that went up to 183. That's where it maxed out. So I effectively kind of have 2 heartbeats that beat at the same time.
At high rates.
Yes.
Okay.
And their concern is that the way that the doctor described it to me is well, you know, imagine you're 12 minutes into the fight and, you know, your adrenaline's up and all of a sudden the current in your heart loops back on itself and causes cardiac arrest.
You're probably sick of these analogies.
Yeah.
Aren't you?
I was like, oh, okay, right. So how likely is that? Oh, well, no, it's not likely. So can you clear me to fight? Well, no, we're gonna have to go into your heart and have a look, you know. And it was just this weird kind of like, no one gave me a good explanation of why I couldn't fight, other than the fact that I'm slightly more of a liability now than I was before.
And is your heart rate up around those levels when you're fighting 5 rounds with GSP?
I would think so. Not consistently.
Right, you couldn't be
because I
consistent.
couldn't keep it up. But I would certainly think, you know, 170 range, 170, 175.
It's just interesting because you've been training at the top level of athleticism, which is mixed martial arts, for 13 years, or 15 years more, and you've never had any issues.
Never had any symptoms or anything. And the other issue that I'm having is that everybody that I speak to about it that's had the procedure has had it because they needed it.
Can you describe this procedure?
It's called a catheter ablation, and they feed whether it's a wire or something up your femoral artery and then one into your neck. But they've said to me that it's not that they can treat me; they want to study it because it's kind of abnormal because of how strong it is and because of the job that I do. So they don't know whether they can fix it. They want to feed the wires into my heart so they can measure the second heartbeat. And if it's strong, and B, if it's in a safe place, they can then burn it.
Burn the cells out.
Yeah, burn the cells. But if it's not very strong, which we already know that it is, so they don't really need to give me that option, then they can clear me to fight. And if it's in a place that's not safe, if it's too close to my regular heartbeat, they can't touch it anyway, because then that would just shut my heart down and I would have to have a pacemaker. But the issue is that obviously the easiest option for everybody is just for me to go and have it done.
Which is what you're getting
because
pushed for.
that's what everybody wants. So the fans all want me to just go and get it done. I get tweets constantly. My 6-year-old's just had this done. You should just go and get it done and get on with it. But yeah, but your 6-year-old needed it done, and I don't. So the only reason I would have it done is if I really want to fight a few more times.
Yeah. So that's the question.
Yeah.
Do you want to get this done and fight, or do you just want to go and live your life?
Well, the thing is, I would love to fight again. That's the problem. But not to the point where I would go through something like that I don't feel I need to do. It just doesn't seem right to me.
It's not an option, that procedure.
No, I'm comfortable. I'm healthy. I've never had a symptom. So then, what if somebody goes in and starts messing about with it and it causes more issues? You know, I've heard of people that have had ablations that have had to go back 3 or 4 times to have more work done. I don't want this to be a part of my life, and because it's not affecting my life right now, other than my career, I don't really see a point. And I don't hang that much value on my career, to be honest.
Right. That's my question. Take us back 7 years, and you get the same diagnosis, and UFC says, look, you want to keep fighting, you got to have the surgery. Would the Dan Hardy of 7 years ago had a different decision?
You wanted to be champ then, so
yeah. I would have.
You would have.
No, you're right. You're right. I would have made a different decision, I'm sure. And it would have taken somebody like my mum or my dad to talk me out of it.
Right.
You know.
The sensible side.
Yeah.
And how much do you think, maybe this is a strange question, but how much do you think that the psychedelics have a part in expanding your mind and showing you that what does any of this matter to a certain extent, as far as the ultimate thing isn't your fighting career,
well,
there's other things in your life?
Yeah, I mean, partly because of the losing streak, I am aware of my other options because I've already explored them.
Right.
And partly because of the ayahuasca and, because of the psychedelic experiences in general, I have an acceptance now of just what is, you know. Sometimes it just is what is, and just accept it and keep moving.
Very Buddhist.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, my mum said to me when I called her up and I kind of explained, she said, well, you know, you've been talking about retiring in 12 months, but we both know that it would take something like this to stop you fighting. And the thing is, and it's going to sound strange, but it's my comfort zone. Like training camp and fighting is my comfort zone. I can do it every day, all day, and it's easy because I know what to do.
And you know you're good at it, so you get that positive feedback.
Yeah. So the idea of actually like saying, I can carry on doing this if I choose to, but I'm done with it now. I'm going to go and do something entirely different. There's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. So I think it might have taken something like this to pull me out of the situation anyway.
So have you made any decisions?
University starts in September.
Yeah, not this year.
LSE has a great philosophy program.
Is that right?
I looked into it. Yeah.
I might have been punched too many times in the head to get accepted, though. That's the problem. I have so many options on the table for me right now, and I'm kind of in a bit of limbo with the UFC, because obviously they're very keen to keep me on board, and they want me to carry on fighting, which I do and the fans do, but I have made my decision about this, and unless there's some kind of flexibility on their side, it is what it is.
But why could you not fight in a jurisdiction that's not going to test your EKG?
Because it's not about them. It's not about not passing the test. It's about the liability of letting me fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is, I mean, they could let me fight in London, and you can wear shoes in London to fight, and no one cares. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. But we have no athletic commission, so you can do what you like effectively. So the UFC is only answerable to themselves. But then, in the very, very highly unlikely circumstance that something does happen,
Their insurance fails.
Exactly, and they already knew about it. That's the problem. Now they're aware of it.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't want to put that on. I don't want to put that on the sport. I wouldn't want that for the sport of the UFC, because the MMA is still very fragile.
Yeah.
And a recognizable athlete fatality in the sport would do too much damage. So I wouldn't want that. And if I felt like I was a liability, I would be like, all right, I'm done. I'm too much of a risk.
You're obviously very eloquent and intelligent. Could you work on the other side of the camera?
Well, there are options, and like I was saying, the BT Sports thing. I'm talking with the UFC at the moment about possibly doing something quite consistently with that, which I would like. And there is talk about more shows in the UK. I know that's always coming up, but it is definitely a focus in their plans to be out in Europe more. So there is scope for me.
I feel as though there's a book in you as well somewhere.
A what?
A book.
There's a few, I think.
They say there's a book in everyone, but in some people it should stay.
Yeah, but this one I think people will want to read.
Yeah, that's probably right. And you're doing some stuff with the U.S. military coming up as well, right?
Yeah. They contacted me about doing some traveling and the odd 10, 12-day trip and go and meet some troops and teach some seminars. And I always get so much from those experiences, because you meet people with crazy life experiences,
Some people would find that surprising about you supporting military.
But very patriotic. Look at the
Yeah.
I thought it was a little bit of a juxtaposition, was the patriotism and then sort of the very liberal view on certain things. But I think you can reconcile it within yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I could be like, no, I'm not doing anything for the US military and all that, but it's not about the military. It's about the people making the decisions for the military I don't agree with, Just generally, I don't agree with war generally. I understand why it happens, but there's no need for it ever. But it's not the people they're just doing a job, just like I'm doing mine, and people complain about that. But there's so much to learn from these people. Like an example, I went out to Germany before I fought Marcus Davis, and I was with Mike Swick and John Fitch. We had a blast. They're great guys. This was before I fought Mike as well.
Okay.
So we were on this bus for a few days, driving around the military bases and meeting troops and stuff. And we went to a hospital, and there was a guy in one room. And he had his arm in a cast, and basically what had happened was he was driving through a built-up area, and he was the gunner on the Hummer that they were driving, and a rocket-propelled grenade had hit the front of the Hummer and blown up the gun, and a piece of it had gone through his arm and broke both bones and pinned his arm to the roof of the vehicle. So he was going through a lot of rehabilitation to get the use back in his hand and his wrist, and he was so excited that we were there, because obviously he's a big UFC fan, and the UFC are really good at getting the UFC to the military for
fight
nothing.
for the troops. They've done that a couple of times.
That's really good, because I've seen how much it means to them. But the only other thing he could talk about was getting healthy so he could get back to his group of guys. He just wanted to get back there, and he was upbeat, and he was in high spirits, and he was happy, and he was like, "I'm just disappointed that I'm not out there with them, because I kind of feel like I'm letting them down." And then in the room next to him, there was a guy that works on the base in Germany that, for some reason or another, someone had forgot to put the handbrake on the truck that he was working on. He was an engineer, and the truck rolled over his legs and broke both of them. And he was the most miserable dude I've ever met. You know what I mean? And it's like the injuries, really, I don't really consider them to be too much different. I mean, this guy broke both his legs below the knee, and the other guy had, like, you know, pretty much smashed his arm to bits, but in combat and by accident. And the guy in combat was like, because he'd been much closer to death, you know.
Yeah.
And that was what I got from it. Like, the guys that have been in combat that have been much closer to death have so much more of an appreciation for life and so much more of a lust for it as well. You can get some real good conversation out of these people. Whereas the guy on the other side that had just been fixing a truck and it ran over his legs, he was like, just sulking. I couldn't believe it.
Do you know who Pat Tillman is?
I know the name.
So he was an American football player, and I think he was playing for the Atlanta Falcons. And he'd just been offered. He was always like he was a defensive player, always struggling to make it to college, and then he made it into the NFL. And he'd just been offered a multi-million-dollar contract. September 11th hits. He's a patriot. He rejects the contract, goes to Afghanistan. So signs up as a ranger, goes to Afghanistan to fight because he's a very patriotic guy. Goes with his brother and then gets killed by friendly fire. And they do a big, because he's such a emblem for the war and for, like, this is what a patriot should be. This is what he should go and do. They completely lie about the circumstances of his death, and it's a very sad story which eventually comes out. But he was a very, very patriotic guy that gave up a lot to go and do something that he believed in. He didn't believe in war. He didn't like necessarily the whole ethos, but he felt that he should defend his country. So I thought that might resonate with you a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's definitely worth reading. It's a very, very interesting book. I think it's When Men Win Glory is the name of the book.
Okay, I'll write that down.
Did you ever consider military service?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I was interested in being a PT. That's what I would like to have done. It was just a way of dedicating my life to training, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was the only time I really thought about it. But I have a problem with people who are in positions of authority that I don't feel they don't have my respect, you know.
That could be a problem in the military.
Yeah, well, it's a problem generally.
Yeah.
It's a problem generally. Like, I got a speeding ticket the other week for doing a speed on a road that I thought was completely acceptable, but it happened to be a little bit quicker than the speed limit. But the guy that gave me the ticket, I don't necessarily agree with him, and the guy that gave him his job, I might not agree with him, and the person that set the rules on the speed limit, I might not agree with him. So I just kind of go with what I feel is right, you know. But anyway, that was a bit of a diversion. But anyway, going back to what you were saying, that's a good example of why I don't have a problem with the military, because the military the guys in the military are only acting off the information that they're given. So like if he was told, yeah, terrorists attacked America and they're in Afghanistan and we're going to go and get them, then if you had no reason to question that, then why would you? You know. So then there's just kind of I don't want to use the word ignorance, but I can't think of a better way of using it. It's a lack of lateral thinking. It's a lack of, hang on a minute, maybe what I'm being told is not quite as accurate as they're pitching it on Fox News. You know what I mean?
But it's like in 2001, we didn't have social media. We didn't have this whole sharing of information, which I think enables us to make a lot more educated decisions now.
Definitely.
Whereas then, you know, all you saw was your compatriots being, you know, killed under tons of rubble, and it was a sort of a very big impact upon your life.
Yeah.
And you didn't. It was very difficult to discern what was truly happening here and abroad. So I think we're in a much better place to make those calls now.
Yeah, definitely. But with the US, it's much less like that in the US. I think it's like if you watch the news during some kind of conflict, it's like they cover it like the NFL. It's like watching the Super Bowl. It's like, so this is where we're at, Operation Desert Storm or whatever it is, and they're like, so we're going to bring these tanks up here, and we've got a group of insurgents there, and then you've got like graphics with like helicopters flying in and like troops running and explosions, and people are like, oh, this is really happening. I'm seeing it on TV in front of me. It's like it's animation, you know, and this stuff's sinking into people's subconscious, and they're accepting it as truth.
And it's the same thing with crime statistics.
Yeah.
So the media is used to make people scared and constantly on edge to enable government to take more and more control out of their lives. And, you know, if you look at actual crime statistics, they're down. There are less gun crimes. There are less knife crimes in London.
Yeah, we had a whole guest that was talking about that, how crime has gone down like significantly. I want to ask you a couple London Real questions. These might be a little weird, but if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Dan Hardy and give him some advice, and it can't be, keep going, dude, you're doing great.
Yeah.
What would it be?
Wrestle more.
Come on.
No, you know what? I don't think I would.
You wouldn't make the call? Or
I think I'd ask him questions.
Okay.
I don't think I would have anything to say to him. Because I don't think I would want to give anything away.
It's about the journey, right?
Yeah.
What would you ask him?
I'd ask him how he was doing.
Yeah.
I'd ask him what he was doing and why he was doing it.
And get his
Because these weren't questions I was asking myself at the time. I was just doing what I felt was right to do. I went to university, and I enjoyed it while I was there. I had a great time, but I went to university because I was supposed to go to university.
Where'd you go?
Nottingham Trent. I did contemporary art.
You always have a sketch pad on you, they say.
I did. I used to carry one around all the time.
But you didn't know why you were doing what you were doing.
No, not really. Not really. Martial arts just appealed to me from a very young age. From the Ninja Turtles, straight away I was hooked, and then it just all the way through. And
Who was your favourite?
The Ninja Turtles. Yeah. Well, I started off with Michelangelo when I was a kid, and this was where my maturity came as a martial artist. Like, Michelangelo was the fun one that was good, had the nunchaku, and I was like, yeah, love Michelangelo, he's a party guy. And then when I was a little bit older, I started to realise that Raphael was the one that everybody respected. He was like, everyone listened to what he said, he was calm and level-headed and had a lot of common sense, and he was more of the martial artist of the group, so then it was Raphael. Not many people analyze Ninja Turtles.
Do you think martial arts is ultimately the path of asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing? In a way, were you all maybe pursuing that subconsciously all your life?
I think so. I think everybody starts off that way, though. Everyone does as a kid. I've just spent a couple of days hanging out with Dean Singer, and he's got a beautiful little daughter who's 4 next week, and she's just fascinating to watch because she's like, you'll say something and she'll repeat it straight away. It's a brand new word for her, and she's trying it, and she's tasting new things and touching and feeling and constantly trying to grow. And we get to a stage, and some people get to that stage at 9. Some people get to it in their 40s, where they get to a stage where they're like, I'm good with this now. It's kind of consistent. There's no surprises coming tomorrow unless it's a flat tire or that kind of thing. Whereas there are other people, and they're the foot on the gas people that do, and it can be anything. Martial arts is just one path. It can be psychedelics, it can be yoga, it can be rock climbing, whatever it is. It's about the path and about the journey, and it's just riding it till the wheels fall off.
Will you have children?
I'd like to.
Do you think it's an essential part of the human experience?
It's a part of the human experience that I would feel like I'd missed out on if I got old and I'd not.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Back to this, I'll finish out the advice question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
God, I get these questions sometimes, and they're just so difficult because I don't know.
Okay.
Take a few days.
Yeah. This will be it.
Tweet at me.
Yeah. I'll be sitting on the underground on the way back to my hotel, and all of a sudden it will come to me.
Just tweet me. All right. Yeah. Last question is, and this is a really interesting one, considering your situation and your history. Like, what advice do you give to the 20-year-old out there who's listening to this and who maybe wants to be a UFC fighter someday, or maybe who wants to go down to Peru and drink ayahuasca, or wants to grow up and be like Dan Hardy? What do you tell them?
Just go and do it. Just go and do it. It doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're doing something. I really genuinely feel that now. There was a psilocybin experience that I had where I felt like I got a real clear picture of like the earth as an organism, and the fact that we're all this obviously the cliche of we're all one. Genki Sudo was banging on about this years ago, and he's right. And now Mac Danzig with his new shirts is the same. We're all one. We're all the same. We're all the same species. We're all effectively on a molecular level, the same as the trees in the photograph on the wall. And this was something that Albert Hoffman talked about a lot as well. He cured himself of depression with logic, just like, well, I'm on a molecular level, I'm the same as the tree. There's just minor differences. So ultimately, what's the point? Well, I think it's to create energy, to create noise. We've got to create vibration. We've got to be doing things, connecting with people, and going places, and just leaving a wake,
burning brightly.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
inactive people frustrate you.
They don't frustrate me. I just I
sad.
don't see the point in them. They just
Do things, make mistakes, that kind of thing.
Say that again.
You want people to you kind of advise to do things, make mistakes,
Do anything.
and
Do anything.
There's so many people in a rut that just like go from one day to the next, just repeating and repeating and repeating. And they may think that they're happy, but it feels to me that it's just quite a sad experience, and you need to get out and.
Not talking about yourself, are you?
No.
We'll talk about that off camera.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mac, and I loved his podcast. I think it was all 3 episodes of.
Yeah.
So please ask him to continue.
Okay.
I think it was just you and him, and then Forrest jumped in there for that one.
Yeah, that was wild.
Well, obviously he lost his last fight. It was against Melvin, who was a beast. I saw you shake Melvin's hand afterwards, and you shook Mac. Mac looked great before that. I just wondered how that made you feel emotionally, or is that just kind of part of the fight game?
Again, from the ayahuasca, from the Peru trip, the acceptance of what is really helping. And immediately when it happened, I felt the upset and the pain and the anger that Mac would have felt if he was conscious when it happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like it kind of leapt out of him and it came out of me. And I was like, just for a second, I was like furious and angry and sad all at the same time.
Is that lizard? Is that lizard at that point?
Yeah, no doubt. But it's no doubt. Reptile comes out immediately, and then but straight away I can step away and see it as what it is, and it's a sport, and it doesn't matter, and
there's nothing you can do about it anymore.
No.
So as soon as you can't do something about something that's painful in your life, what's the point of worrying about it?
Yeah.
Because you can no longer influence it.
Yeah.
So just let it go, and let's move on to the next thing.
yeah.
Wise words.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it's true. Like I can't fix it. The situation's already happened and it's over. And without getting into the argument about whether time's linear or not, we can't go back. It's happened and we accept it and we move from it. And we had a good conversation that night. I went and hung out with him for a few hours in his hotel room, and we talked about it. And surprisingly, he was in a much better place than I've ever seen him before. And I don't really know why. Because he was in such a good place before the fight. He was physically in great shape, mentally he was there, and it is sometimes you just lose. Sometimes you just lose. It's a sport, and you roll the dice, and sometimes you're on the receiving end. And against a guy like Gallard, he cracks you one time, and that's all it takes. So I'm just really excited about what comes next for Mac. Because he's another one of those people that's just so talented, he can do so many things. It's just a case of choosing which one he's going to do and pursuing it.
I mean, listening to that podcast, all 3 of you talking, it seems like, all 3 of you kind of mentally, partially are kind of moving away from the sport sometimes, and thinking about other options.
Yeah.
I know Mac does a lot of photography and things like that. So when I saw him that game that night, it was like really exciting to see, that he still wasn't, he was still in the sport. And not
He's got
away.
the skills and the ability and the talent to be the champion. And I'm not saying that because he's my friend. I believe it. I don't work with people unless I feel they've got that potential.
He came across as quite angry and intolerant in The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
And you think he's developed on from that?
He has, but that's really just Mac. That's just Mac's like. It's weird because it's like he's walking around like a lizard with a higher consciousness inside, whereas most people are walking around with a higher consciousness with the lizard inside. You know what I mean?
But he has a firm grip on his lizard or not?
Yeah, he does. He does, unless it's in the gym, and then he likes.
But then,
he
that's
gets,
kind of that's where you're supposed to let him run.
But going into that fight with Melvin, and and knowing that Mac could walk away with that victory quite comfortably. The only way he can lose it, and on that level, it's the same with most guys. The only way they can lose it is if mentally they're not in the right place, and it's a roll of the dice, Mac was in a great place, but we knew that if he went into the fight and he got too drawn into the fight, that's when Melvin's at his strongest. Because then Mac's in the pocket, not really thinking about his head movement, and he's rolling and he's just throwing punches, and that's what he does in the gym. Like and I spent, and he probably hates me as well, but I spent most of his training camp when I was there trying to like rile him up in the gym, try and get a reaction out of him to see how much of a handle he had on it, because I knew that Melvin was going to frustrate him.
Yeah.
You know.
So you don't chalk that loss up to chance. You chalk it ultimately up to not being present at that moment.
In my opinion, it's not that he wasn't present. It was that he was too present. Okay. And this is again going back to the reptilian brain stuff. Mac was overanalyzing everything that he was doing. I think there was too much of a thought process. And I had this during the Sedala fight. I was going backwards and forwards in and out of this space. But with the Ludwig fight, I started off being very analytical and genuinely like having a dialogue in my head of, okay, I can see him moving that way, I should set up this combination. Whereas about a minute into the fight, he cracked me on the chin with a good right hand, and it rocked me for a second, and I rushed him to the fence. And as I was having a conversation in my head about, okay, I'm a little bit rocked, I should kind of take my time here, I'm already reacting to what he's doing without thinking about it. I'm controlling his body up against the fence, and then I created that room for the elbow left hook that I landed off the fence. And I wasn't thinking about that.
We've talked about this before as well. It's the flow. It's like you don't even think, when you get busy with something and you don't think about it, it just happens. And then suddenly it's the end of the fight, or you're 2 hours in and you've just written your paper, or you've just completed the spreadsheet that you were building, or you've just decided how you're going to market your new product, and you've got all these things and you don't realize how it happened. It's just happened.
Yeah. You
so
see,
so
and
you're
it's
in the flow in a fight, effectively.
Yeah, and that's like, for me with the fighting, that's the reptilian brain, because I always kind of talk about it like it's separate, because I can't function in my regular daily life if I listen to it too much, because it just causes me too much trouble. So if I talk about it like it's separate, it's almost like training it like a dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so there's my reptile, and I want him to be better at wrestling, and I want him to be better at jiu-jitsu. So I'm going to train and train and train, and then when the fight comes, reptile will immediately draw on these techniques that I've drilled into
Because
my
he knows how to do
subconscious.
it, yeah.
Exactly.
But if you stop fighting, how do you continue to develop the reptile brain?
You're not going to stop training, though, are you?
No, I'm not going to stop training. I've started Wolfcam, Hardy's Wolfcam on YouTube. So that's it's been a little bit slack while I've been traveling, but that's going to be quite a continuous YouTube channel of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And it started off more as a training blog, but I'm going to start integrating much more of this stuff into it and help people understand the thought process behind the stuff I'm doing in the videos. Because at the moment it's like kettlebell stuff and gymnastics or whatever.
I think you've gotten a whole new fan base in the last year to 18 months, when you start talking about whether it's Peru or all these other things that, you know.
But this goes back to what we were saying before about just being open about it.
Right.
Right. I wouldn't have made those connections. And I don't like I don't like the whole celebrity and fan thing. I've never adjusted to it. I still find it very strange. But I appreciate that those people are interested in what I'm doing. And if I hadn't have talked about these things, then I wouldn't have made those connections. And there have been so many connections along the way that I've made just by being open and being forthright about what I'm interested in and what I feel is important to me as a being, regardless of what the law says.
I don't know. Respect to that, man. So no surgery, no chance, no matter how many tweets.
Nope.
I saw like Dana White's ear surgery for his Meniere's disease. I don't know if you saw it, but it was really gruesome.
Yeah.
And then later he found out it wasn't necessary, and he flew to some crazy, stem cell place in Germany, and they fixed him up. And I'm wondering if you see that and you're like, yeah, why would I do a surgery? And this is the president of the UFC who's got the best doctors in the world, and they've just done this nasty looking thing where they pulled his ear off his head and saw it in there. And
No, not for me.
Not
but
for you.
But the thing is, that was affecting his life. It was uncomfortable for him. So I understand it. If there's an option to possibly make your life a little bit easier, then why not? But it's not affecting my life. It's just affecting my career. So it's not really a big deal for me. I don't feel, and this is my argument, and I kind of put a fun spin on it when I first found out, because obviously it was a weird situation with me being 7 weeks into training camp, and you know what it's like when you're training for a fight and you're ready to go at 6 weeks, and then you just gotta kind of hold yourself back for a few more. So I was already in the flow of fighting, and when I was told I couldn't, there's like an excess of energy that you don't really know what to do with. But so I kind of started to I kind of gave it like a fun spin, start calling it Wolf Heart and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I'm not convinced that this is not an evolutionary advantage. I mean, I tweeted about it, and I tweeted, it was a very tongue-in-cheek tweet. I said something about the fact that California won't clear me because they think I have an unfair advantage because I have a second heartbeat, and you got to kill me twice. But you know, like any kind of abnormality that worked out as a benefit eventually became commonplace. That's how
Darwinian
exactly.
evolution.
If you buy into that, which you know I'm fairly on board with. Okay. So then why would that not be a secondary evolution? Something that's maybe it is an unfair advantage. Maybe that's why I just don't like giving up. You know.
Maybe it's going to take you to a level much higher than the UFC.
Exactly. So I personally, I think they're just trying to get me. You know, they're trying to downgrade me so I'm on their level. I'm not playing the game.
Right, some J. Edgar Hoover type shit.
Yeah,
just like get him out of the picture. 10 years from now, do you think we will, Dan Hardy will be on television or on Twitter, or do you think he might just disappear from like the public eye?
I think I would find it very difficult to disappear because I think there are so many people looking at me now, so many eyes on me, and I feel it. You know, like every day. Like if I don't tweet for the day, at the end of the day, I've got 100 tweets. Where are you? You know, what have you been doing, and why are you not tweeting? You know, people are hungry for you know to find out what I'm doing, and I don't think that's because it's nothing to do with me. It's just about my approach to life. Because there are a lot of people that see the way I live my life, and they're like, God, he's living the life. And I've been back to Nottingham, and every time I go back, there's always a couple of people that are a little bit resentful. You know, live in Las Vegas. You know, dating his hot yoga teacher and fighting in the UFC, and you know, and there's this kind of like there's this resentment, but it's not. They don't resent the fact that I'm doing it. They resent the fact that they're not. You know, so that's one side of it. But the other side are the people that are just excited because someone's doing it. You know, they're like, "What have you been doing? Tell me what you've been doing. I'm fascinated." And that's the kind of fan base I'm cultivating, just because I'm just doing what I feel like I want to do, and I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I can. And that's entirely through, you know, mixed martial arts. I've made a little money, so I don't have to worry about getting a job at Sainsbury's just yet. But
how do you deal with Vegas though as a place? It seems like the most un-Dan Hardy place I could possibly think
of. But I don't buy into the whole Vegas thing at all. You know,
so you're out in the desert somewhere, or
I don't drink or gamble. So the point in going down to the Strip is, other than showing family and friends around, I don't go down to the Strip at all. And I have a spot right on the edge of town over near Red Rock Canyon. So it takes me 2 minutes to be out and into the desert, and I love it. And Vegas, you know, you say Vegas and everybody thinks of the Strip.
Yeah, but there's a lot more to it.
There's so much more. I mean, Lake Mead, Valley of Fire, Mount Charleston's awesome. It's got snow a lot of the year. Like I'm like down in the desert sweating my ass off, and then at weekends I go up to Mount Charleston and I'm hiking through snow. That's
crazy.
You know?
Yeah.
And the good thing about Vegas is that because everyone wants to come there, it's easy to get out. There are so many flights to and from that I can live in Vegas and get anywhere in the world really easily. So it's a kind of a good base camp for me at the moment, you know.
Awesome. Dan, it seems like you might have made your decision for your career, but, you know, we won't pin you down here. But, you know, thanks for being so open about all this stuff, you know.
No worries. Thanks for asking the questions, because people obviously want to hear them.
Yeah, they definitely do. For Twitter, you're Dan Hardy MMA, that's right?
Twitter and Instagram now as well.
You're an Instagram fan, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting a little addictive. I just started recently.
Yeah, it's good fun.
And YouTube channel. I'm a big fan of YouTube channel.
So Hardy's Wolfcam.
Hardy's Wolfcam.
Yeah, I've got about 10 or 12 videos up now, and I've got 3 more ready to upload when I have a decent Wi-Fi connection, and then about 6 ready to go. And it's all West Coast road trip. I went out to spend a week with Mac in Los Angeles, and then drove up the West Coast to Seattle for the fight, and stopped at, you know, loads of different places.
They just legalized marijuana in Seattle.
They did. Well done. Hey, did you see? I tweeted this the other day. Actually, it's still on my Twitter. The Seattle Police Department are handing out Doritos at Hempfest.
Really?
How cool's that?
It's like because they've got a little message on them about, I think, like safe practice or something. Not because they think people are hungry.
Yeah.
But it's a way of advertising their message on the Doritos.
Yeah.
Oh, safe practice of marijuana. Or,
and the police sergeant was like, you know, well, people will think it's funny because, you know, like now police are handing out munchies. You know what I mean? It's like, it's great.
It's great for PR.
It's really
especially
good.
For Doritos.
Yeah. Although that's the problem, Doritos are.
Yeah.
There are better options.
Do you have an orange?
Yeah. With grapes.
Any nuts?
kale shake or something like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Patrick, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me again.
You kind of set this up via WAD and everything. So thanks to him and all that stuff via the message. And yeah, if you're listening to us on iTunes and you want to see Dan with normal colored hair, we're on YouTube channel London Real TV. And that's it. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and you know, what can I say? It's yeah, it was better than I expected meeting you. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Until then, it's about the journey. Peace.
If you like alternative history, which is what I do, then expect everything that you say to be turned over forensically, very, very closely, by large numbers of hostile academics.